When the will was read, no one reacted at first. The name listed was unfamiliar to most in the room, and the pause that followed felt less like surprise than quiet assessment. The woman who inherited the entire estate was not family and had never appeared publicly with the billionaire. For years, she had worked inside the house, present but largely unnoticed. The billionaire lived in near isolation. He avoided public contact and limited personal interaction. Instructions were brief. Routines were fixed. Inside the mansion, access was uneven. Some areas were used daily, others almost never. Certain doors were checked repeatedly, even when no one was expected to enter them. Explanations were not given, and questions gradually stopped. After his death, the process followed standard expectations. The property would be inspected, assets evaluated, and staff dismissed. Instead, ownership transferred entirely to her under specific conditions. Entry was delayed. Certain rooms had to be documented exactly as they were before anything could be moved. Standing at the entrance, it became clear the house had not simply been lived in. There were signs it had been kept operational for a specific purpose, one that did not appear in any available record. The woman who would later inherit the mansion entered the billionaire's life in an ordinary way. There was no personal interview and no special recommendation. At the time, the property employed a small staff with frequent turnover. The isolation, strict internal rules, and limited interaction made the work difficult to maintain. She was hired to perform basic domestic duties: cleaning, routine upkeep, and support tasks that required consistency rather than initiative. Her employment records show nothing unusual. Her pay remained within standard ranges. Her role did not change. There were no formal promotions or expanded responsibilities. What set her apart, according to later accounts, was reliability. She followed instructions precisely, arrived on time, and avoided unnecessary conversation. Over the years, other employees left. Some resigned, others were dismissed without clear explanation. She remained, not because she became close to the owner, but because she adjusted to the house's internal logic. She learned which areas were active and which were avoided. She understood which tasks had fixed schedules and which could not be delayed under any circumstance. The rules governing the house were specific and rarely explained. Certain doors had to be checked at set intervals. Some lights were never to be turned on, regardless of time or need. Entire sections of the property were excluded from routine maintenance, even when signs of wear became visible. Early attempts to ask for clarification resulted in brief responses. The instructions came directly from the owner and were not open to interpretation. Her contact with the billionaire was limited. Communication often occurred through notes or intermediaries. Conversations were short and functional. He did not ask about her personal life, and she learned not to offer information beyond what was required. Despite this distance, deviations were noticed. Minor changes in routine were corrected the following day, without explanation. As time passed, she became one of the few constants in a house defined by absence. There were no visitors, no social gatherings, and no extended family stays. The mansion functioned less as a home and more as a controlled environment, maintained according to internal procedures that were followed without discussion. Legal documents reviewed after the billionaire's death show that his estate plans were revised multiple times. These revisions focused less on distributing wealth and more on procedure. Access conditions, waiting periods, and instructions tied to physical spaces rather than individuals. Her name appeared in these documents long before his death, always associated with permissions and routines, never ownership. By the time the billionaire withdrew almost entirely from public contact, she was the only employee with uninterrupted presence in the house. She did not know what was being preserved or why strict adherence to routine mattered so much. She only knew that consistency was expected and deviation was not tolerated. Later, those who examined the case questioned whether she had been chosen for her qualities, or for how easily she blended into the background. Someone unlikely to draw attention, someone comfortable with routine, someone who would remain. Access to the mansion was not granted immediately. Although ownership had legally transferred, the will imposed a waiting period and a set of procedural requirements before certain areas could be entered. Legal representatives, independent evaluators, and documentation specialists were scheduled in advance. The process moved at a controlled pace, consistent with how the house itself had always been managed. When entry was authorized, the woman did not arrive as a resident. She entered alongside professionals who treated the property as an object of verification. The initial inspection focused on areas already documented, main rooms, known corridors, and storage spaces listed in existing records. Furniture remained covered. Windows were partially closed. The environment appeared unchanged. For the first several hours, the inspection proceeded routinely. Measurements were taken. Photographs were logged. Notes were recorded according to protocol. During this process, discrepancies became apparent. Interior dimensions did not fully align with architectural records. Certain corridors appeared shorter than expected. The thickness of some walls varied in ways that could not be easily explained. When questioned, the woman explained that there were parts of the house she had never been allowed to enter. She could not identify them by name or precise location. She only knew which routes she was permitted to use and which she had been instructed to avoid. The explanation was noted without discussion, and the inspection continued. Later that day, a concealed door was discovered behind a section of fixed paneling in a corridor that had previously seemed unremarkable. The panel showed no signs of recent alteration. The materials matched the surrounding structure, suggesting it had been part of the house for a long time. The door was not locked. Beyond it, the environment changed immediately. The lighting was functional and evenly distributed, lacking domestic features. The air felt cooler. The passage extended deeper into the structure than any documented floor plan suggested, leading to rooms absent from official records. These rooms were not arranged for habitation. There were no personal objects or furniture associated with daily life. Instead, the spaces were organized for storage and long-term preservation. Shelving units lined the walls. Boxes and folders were arranged methodically. Labels referenced dates, locations, and alphanumeric codes that did not clearly correspond to known properties or events. Dust patterns suggested infrequent access rather than neglect. Everything appeared to have been placed with the expectation that it would remain undisturbed for extended periods. Some documents referenced financial transactions that did not appear in publicly disclosed records. Others contained correspondence with individuals whose names did not appear in the billionaire's known professional or legal associations. What drew particular attention was the structure of the archive. Files were grouped sequentially, suggesting progression rather than simple storage. Certain dates were marked without explanation. In some cases, notes appeared to reference outcomes or actions that were never confirmed to have taken place. As the review continued, the legal team slowed the process. Portions of the archive were separated for further examination. Other items were logged with minimal description. The stated justification was procedural caution, but the effect was fragmentation. No single party retained a complete overview of what had been found. In a smaller adjoining room, a safe was discovered. It was unsecured and appeared intentionally left open. Inside were envelopes labeled with names. Several corresponded to individuals known to have been part of the billionaire's professional or legal network. One envelope bore the woman's name. She did not open it on the property. The presence of the envelope altered the inspection. Until that point, she had been treated as a passive recipient. Its placement suggested her role had been anticipated. On legal advice, the envelope was removed unopened and reviewed later. No official description of its contents was entered into the public record. Accounts describe it as brief and factual, confirming that events were proceeding as intended. After that, the inspection lost momentum. Access requests were delayed. Certain materials were deemed irrelevant without detailed justification. Journalists later encountered incomplete inventories and procedural explanations that offered little clarity. The woman did not move into the mansion. Her visits were limited, scheduled, and accompanied. Those close to her noted not fear, but discomfort, the sense of occupying a position prepared long before she understood it. No formal investigation followed. Authorities cited the absence of clear violations, and procedurally the case closed. What remained was a house organized around anticipation, records preserved beyond their author, and a role assigned quietly, long before it was publicly acknowledged. In the months that followed, the case gradually lost visibility. The inheritance was executed according to legal standards. The documentation was archived in partial form. No authority identified grounds sufficient to reopen the matter. Procedurally, everything had been addressed, yet those directly involved never described the process as resolved. The absence of conclusions was not due to missing material, but to material that resisted interpretation. The records found inside the mansion did not clearly indicate misconduct, nor did they support an explanation that felt complete. The woman remained the legal owner of the property, but never fully occupied it. Certain sections of the house stayed sealed. Others were maintained with minimal intervention, preserving routines that no longer served an obvious purpose. Over time, the mansion became less a residence than a structure held in suspension. What remained consistent was the sense that her role had not been incidental. Long before ownership was transferred, she had already been positioned within the house's routines and restrictions. Whatever the billionaire expected to happen after his death, he prepared for it carefully. That preparation still exists, in rooms that remain closed and records that continue to resist explanation. If this case messed with your head, follow the channel for more stories like this. We share real events that were documented, but never fully explained. And if there's a case you think should be told here, leave it in the comments. Until the next video, bye-bye.